right here is where you'll want to be careful to pay attention to the bolt release, this metal piece right here, and the bolt release spring. These are the most confusing parts for most people to put back in correctly. Watch that your pins don't jump out and get too far away from you. The hammer will swing down and there will be a spring inside of there. Here's your bolt release spring. Short end hooks in there, the circle goes down, the rear retaining pin goes through both the bolt release and the bolt spring. The bolt release is in this orientation. There's one hole. That is your rear retaining pin hole. And this is what actually stops your bolt from coming out of the action. So this needs to be facing down and forward towards the front chamber end of the action. Here's the trigger or hammer spring that you'll want to watch out for. Hammer falls down, it's loose. The rear retaining pin Alright, we're back here at the no off-season shop and we have taken out the old Remington 700 trigger. We will now show you the installation process of your new Jewell trigger. To give you an overview, we will first install the front retaining pin, and then we will put in the bolt release and bolt release spring, and finally we will install the rear retaining pin and adjust the trigger pull weight. To begin, we slide the trigger group and housing into the action. We take the front retaining pin and you work it in there so that it catches and begins to hold the trigger tightly in the action. Now we set that retaining pin and we set it so that it is flush with that bolt recess cutout in order that the bolt release doesn't bind when it's in use. So the next step is to install the bolt release. Proper orientation will be important here, and remember that the protrusion goes towards the front and it just drops right into that cutout. The next step is to install the bolt release spring. Remember that the short arm goes in the back and hooks on the trigger housing cutout, and the front arm goes towards the front while that coil slips down in behind that bolt release. Bring this back forward. The bolt release has a slight hook on the very back that this will mate into. And now this can be a tricky part, I usually use another punch to keep the trigger housing in line, and then taking the rear retaining pin, I slide it into the bolt release and try to get it also through that coil. It may take a little bit of jimmying, but you should be able to get it through both the bolt release and the coil and get it started into that rear retaining pin hole. Because the Jewell trigger is a self-contained unit, there's no need to worry about the hammer or the hammer spring. Finally, your next step will be to adjust the trigger pull weight. There are 3 screws on the trigger housing. The front one adjusts the sear, the middle one adjusts over travel, and the one on the trigger shoe adjusts the pull weight. The sear engagement and the over travel will not need to be adjusted. They come pre-adjusted from the Jewell. The tool that you use to adjust the trigger pull weight is a 50 thousandths Allen wrench, so .050 Allen wrench. Turning the screw counterclockwise will decrease the amount of weight it takes to fire your rifle, and turning the screw clockwise will increase the amount of weight to fire your rifle. Remember when you're doing this to always keep a trigger pull gauge to measure the weight and ensure that you're within the safety limits of the trigger. The spring that comes with it is adjustable down to 8 ounces and up to 48 ounces. It is spring A. You will see listed in the Jewell trigger instruction manual that there are 3 springs. The one that comes in the trigger is spring A. Alright, so now that you have your rifle assembled, you'll want to check for safety. First couple things you want to do are run your bolt back and forth, make sure that your sear doesn't drop. The next thing, put your rifle on safety, test the trigger. Sear doesn't drop. You'll also want to run your safety back and forth to make sure that that also doesn't cause any misfires. Finally, one thing we like to do is to wrap the buttstock of the rifle against the ground and double check that any sharp bumps do not cause the rifle to misfire. Test it on fire, and everything appears to be good to go. So that's all there is to it. Thank you for joining us here at No Off Season. We hope that this video has been helpful in the installation of your new Jewell trigger. And if there are any more questions, feel free to contact us. Our information is on our website. Thanks again.